The Death Mage Who Doesn't Want a Fourth Time. Chapter 39. With honor and fame, without land or a successor, that's the kind of nobleman I want to be. I want coffee milk. Vandaloo whispered this as he got out of the bath and remembered a promise he had made at a bathhouse on Earth. Apparently, there was coffee in Lambda, but it wasn't a major drink. It seemed to be a drink for only a small portion of the wealthy. The wealthy, in other words, celebrities, the bourgeoisie. Thinking about that only made him want to drink it more. Wouldn't there be coffee trees growing somewhere? Basking in the breeze created by an electric fan-shaped golem that he had made himself, he remembered that coffee could be replicated by dandelion roots. I wonder if I can make it using the dandelions in this world. Well, if I find any, I'll give it a try. He had been unable to drink coffee at some point on Earth because his uncle had declared that coffee was a luxury. So he had read a book in his middle school's library called Edible Wildflowers in the City, and tried it out. If it turned out to be delicious in this world as well, he would recommend it to everyone. Now then, I guess it's time to go. Stop spinning. Ordering the electric fan-shaped golem to stop spinning, Vandaloo left the bathhouse to begin the medical examination of Bastia's body. Incidentally, the dandelion coffee that Vandaloo would create in the future would turn out to not be very delicious, perhaps because the plant itself differed from the dandelions on Earth. It did not become popular in Talosheim. However, he made electric fan-shaped golems from the surplus wood that could obey certain commands, such as rotating their propellers, setting their rotation speed to one of 3 levels, and swaying left and right across a bed. These became popular in Talosheim instead. Now then, I'll start the medical examination. Yeah, I'm counting on you. Wearing a white fur in place of a white doctor's gown, Vandaloo immediately used spirit form transformation on his arms, which then penetrated Bastia's body as she was lying down. It was his first time examining Bastia with this method, but he had done it plenty of times to other ghouls, so he was very accustomed to doing this. Maybe it's because her rank increased. Her body is the embodiment of health. There were no problems with her blood vessels, or the function of her major organs. In fact, everything was very vigorous. There was also no problem with her uterus. Vandaloo couldn't see any injuries, inflammation, or disease. Could it be that pure coincidence, or perhaps stress, was the reason she couldn't get pregnant? So he thought, but he checked her ovaries as well, just in case. This is strange. What is this? And then he felt a strong, uncomfortable feeling. What's wrong, Van? It seems that your hands have stopped. Bastia was enduring the sensation of some foreign objects creeping around inside her, but she noticed that Vandaloo's behavior had changed and spoke out to him. I'm going to examine you a bit more, so tell me if it feels unpleasant. As he said this, Vandaloo concentrated on examining her 2 ovaries. Normally, the ovaries and testes would contain strong signs of life. Vandaloo perceived that as heat. With healthy ovaries and testes, touching them with his spirit form hands would feel like plunging them into boiling water. But Bastia's ovaries did not feel hot. Are her ovaries dead? No, it's not to that extent. But they're not functioning normally. So what was causing this problem? Vandaloo examined them again, but there was no injury or disease. Vandaloo consulted his knowledge that he had learned on Earth and the information he had overheard in Origin. Now that I think about it, Those researchers did say that my death attribute magic contributed to the fields of obstetrics and gynecology. They were unpleasant people who would constantly be muttering things in an indistinguishable tone and then shout at Vandaloo when he failed to hear them. Well, Vandaloo didn't care about the researchers right now. If I recall, abortion, contraception, prevention of sexually transmitted diseases? Infertility treatment. Though not every case had been successful, there had been some occasions in Origin where Vandaloo's death attribute magic had been used to treat infertility. There were numerous methods, such as prolonging the life of the egg cells and sperm as the magic items that he had created for the ghouls did, and using youth transformation on the egg cells. But there were also cases that were difficult to treat with death attribute magic. Bastia's case is one of those. If the egg's cells aren't mature, they cannot be fertilized. It would be simpler to treat this using life attribute magic. The ovaries were functioning suboptimally, and the egg cells were not maturing. With that being the case, it would just be a matter of using life attribute magic to make the ovaries work more vigorously. But Vandaloo possessed no aptitude for the life attribute. Fortunately, there were individuals capable of using life attribute magic in Talosheim, like Nuaza. There was the option of asking him to help. However, there was a problem in that Vandaloo didn't know how knowledgeable Nuaza was about physiology. Magic is strongly influenced by the caster's knowledge and imagination. If a mage who has spent his whole life in a country that is perpetually in the season of summer, and a mage who has spent his whole life in a country with harsh winters were to both create ice using magic, the one from the snowy country would be able to do so more skillfully. In the same way, Nuaza casting some vague magic without knowing how the organs function wouldn't be very effective. Vandaloo could teach Nuaza what he knew, but unlike basic arithmetic, it would take time for Nuaza to understand physiological concepts. Well, then, I'll give it a try first, and if that doesn't work, then I'll ask Nuaza to help. What are you saying about Nuaza? This method was very roundabout, and many steps would have to be followed. The gist of it was that Vandaloo would suck out the negative components of the ovaries and transfer his own vitality to them, making them function normally. Though the overall process would be difficult to control using life attribute magic, it would be completed in one step, while doing it with death attribute magic required the process to be divided into dozens of separate steps. Without the Chant revocation skill, it would likely take over an hour. I'll activate Surpass Limits. I wish I had 3 or at least 2 more brains. He began complaining internally about the fact that his head was becoming feverish, even with the use of Surpass Limits, but quickly put those thoughts aside. It feels kind of warm. It's because of my rapid healing skill and healing power enhancement. Even the process of transferring his vitality to her needed him to transform his arms with spirit form transformation, fuse them with Bastia, and trick her body into thinking that they were a part of it, trigger his rapid healing skill, and cast the no attribute spell, healing power enhancement, at the same time. Around 10 minutes passed, and the rapid healing skill stopped. It seemed that things had healed for now. Both the left and right ovaries were now overflowing with enough vitality to burn Vandaloo's spirit form hands. Vandaloo wasn't sure whether they had completely recovered or whether the effects of his treatment were temporary, but it should be fine for at least a month. I've finished treating you for now. Let's see how things go from here. It's over, huh? Thanks. With sweat on her face, Bastia let out a sigh of relief. As Zadiris had experienced when Vandaloo applied youth transformation on her, it seemed that the sensation of his spirit form hands crawling around inside the body was not a pleasant one. I'll inspect you again in a month from now. If anything happens before then, let me know. As Vandaloo said this, he felt a vague feeling that he had become a doctor. As this thought ran through his mind, his stomach growled. It seemed that this work had taken a toll not only on his mana but his body as well. I'm hungry as well. All right, I'll make something. We brought plenty of ingredients with us from the dungeon after all. I'm counting on you. It had been several months since Vandaloo had become 3 years old, but Darcia still didn't allow him to cook using a fire, even though he did possess the cooking skill. Vandaloo removed the wooden lid and gently lifted her out. With a wet cloth he had sterilized with disinfect, he wiped her smooth skin, taking care not to cause any scratches on it. Using sterilize would only kill microorganisms. It wouldn't remove any dust. "Bo-chan, what are you doing?" asked Sam. As you can see, I'm taking care of Zandia by hand. Sam had an indescribably confused expression, but Vandaloo answered his question while caring for Zandia, of whom only the left hand and wrist remained. Now that I think about it, you've started to make quite a lot of different facial expressions, haven't you, Sam? The previous Sam, the spirit form of Sam that had sat on the carriage, was mist in the shape of a person, and the horses pulling the carriage were only mist in the shape of horses. It had been impossible to distinguish any kind of facial expression. However, now that Sam's spirit form skill had leveled up, he definitely appeared to be human at a glance, albeit one with pale skin and red eyes. Each hair of his beard had been reproduced realistically. If he wore a hat to cover his eyes, he would look just like a regular, pale-skinned person. The horses were the same. If they closed their red eyes, they would look like normal horses. No, they might appear too ominous to be called normal, but in any case they did appear to be horses. Ha! Thank you very much. More importantly, why are you performing such a noble deed? I would understand if it were an undead, but I do believe that is but a hand. Vandaloo had cast preservation on the hand to prevent decomposition, but it wasn't undead or anything. It was still just a hand. Sam apparently found it strange that Vandaloo was taking care of it. If I didn't treat it well, she would get angry with me when we meet, won't she? If Zandia had become a sentient undead, she wouldn't be pleased to learn that her hand had been treated poorly. That was why Vandaloo was caring for her hand. Hearing this, Sam gave a sigh of relief. So that's how it is. I had presumed that you might be the kind of person with a strong interest in certain body parts of the opposite sex, Bo-chan. No, I don't have a fetish for hands. What an outrageous misunderstanding. Vandaloo did not have a taste for such things. I see. I have heard that there are many noblemen who have peculiar tastes, so I thought that perhaps— If anything, Father, Bo-chan prefers muscles, said Sarya. The problem with that is we don't have either muscles or hands. Our hands are pieces of armor, after all, said Rita. It seemed that noblemen were sinful people in this world as well. Speaking of noblemen, there's something I wanted to confirm. Darcia spoke as she smoothly appeared and joined the conversation. Mom, I definitely feel hesitant to be discussing things like this with you. Not that. I mean regarding the kind of nobleman that you want to be in the future. That side of things, huh? Vandaloo breathed a sigh of relief. You said that you'll make a child with Bastia when you become an adult. Are you serious about that? He had breathed that sigh of relief too early. I was thinking that things might turn out that way. In any case, Vandaloo was still in a 3-year-old's body, unable to feel lust or feelings of love, so he wasn't sure. But he was thinking that things would end up that way in more than 10 years from now. He thought well of Bastia. She was beautiful, and he didn't feel any negative feelings at being desired by such a person. She was a member of a different race, but Vandaloo himself was a child of mixed blood. It was apparently possible for them to have children, so he couldn't see a reason to refuse. He had always yearned for a warm family anyway. Don't get me wrong, I think that Basdia is a great person too. She's sturdy, and I can believe that she would protect you, Vandaloo. Yes. Vandaloo felt a strange desire to object, but considering he was a young child and Bastia was a ghoul Amazoness, he understood that this was easy to imagine. But I think that many people would loudly disapprove of that if you want to become a nobleman. The Orbom Kingdom is much more tolerant than the Amid Empire, but there will still be people who hate Dampiers as well. It seemed that Darcia was concerned with the events leading up to and after Vandaloo becoming a nobleman. Indeed, when Vandaloo thought about it, it might become a problem if Vandaloo were to have a child with ghouls who were treated as monsters by human society. There had been people who would start baseless rumors even on Earth, and there would be some who would be displeased with a Dampier becoming a nobleman. There would also be problems regarding succession. As Saria said, having children would directly lead to having problems with succession. This was only natural, as noble families were families that continued generation after generation. And whether the Orbom Kingdom would accept the possibility of a half-ghoul child being the next generation's successor to Vandaloo's family was largely questionable. Of course, even after Vandaloo became a nobleman, neither he nor Basdia would think of making their child a nobleman as well. But there would be those who would make a fuss over the mere possibility, even if Vandaloo himself didn't desire that. Vandaloo had never given this proper thought or consideration, but he had something of an idea. About that, I'll alter my course and aim not to be a nobleman but an honorary nobleman. If I recall, honorary noblemen are noblemen for only one generation who cannot be succeeded, right? Yes, it is a title bestowed to people who were made noblemen because of their achievements, and those who cannot succeed their noble families due to being born after the first son. As Darcia and Sam said, honorary noblemen were noblemen who could not have a successor. They generally did not govern over land, and would receive an annuity for the rest of their lives, but they were mostly noblemen only in title. But this only in title nobility would be convenient for Vandaloo. Would you not be content with that, Bochan? Well, most people would consider that to be a great success in life. I've heard that the annuity that such noblemen would receive is several times the income of a normal person, but this was how honorary noblemen were generally treated. There were plenty of stories of individuals who had strived to become noblemen, but only managed to become honorary noblemen. Yes, because just receiving an annuity without having land, an official position, or a successor is much more convenient. Naturally, Vandaloo had no need for land. He had no knowledge of how to make a region prosper. He could simply find and employ a reliable vassal to do it for him, but doing that on his own would be difficult. No matter how he thought about it, he could only imagine that it would be more than he could handle. He did think that he would be able to do various things with golem transmutation if he owned the land with people living in it, however. An official position would be too much to handle as well. Vandaloo had lived for around 40 years in total, but he had no experience in regards to society. He could probably fill in the position if someone taught him how, but he couldn't imagine that it would be enjoyable work. As for having a successor, when he had seen how long Dampier's lifespans were at the Adventurers Guild before, he had thought, that would be impossible. He had estimated that he would live for 3,000 years as long as he wasn't killed. There was no way he would become a nobleman that would be succeeded. That was probably why he was aiming to be an honorary nobleman. He would have no land, official position, or successors, but those around him would still respect him as a nobleman. It would be much easier to reach this position than a court rank, where he would have land and require a successor. The reason I wanted to become a nobleman was so that the guys who will be reincarnating here from Origin will hesitate to kill me, and because I want enough money to live in luxury. I'm all right with being either a nobleman or an honorary nobleman, as long as I have the reputation that comes with it. What will you do to gain the required sum of money? Asked Sam. I'm thinking I can just earn it normally as an adventurer. Let's do our best, everyone. Even just the materials that they had obtained from clearing Garon's Valley today would sell for a considerable sum at an adventurer's guild. Vandaloo figured that if he could earn this much as a 3-year-old, he would eventually be able to earn more than a lowly nobleman if he continued working hard. And I'm sure that giving up my nobility would also be simple if I were an honorary nobleman. Huh? You're going to give it up? Asked Saria. Yes, I think I'll consider it when I come to an understanding with the others who will be reincarnated. For Vandaloo, gaining the status of nobility was nothing more than a means to an end. It was true that being a nobleman would be convenient. It would certainly feel good to exercise his influence and special rights, and he had no doubt that there would be delicious foods that only noblemen could eat, high-quality goods that only noblemen could obtain, and pieces of art that only noblemen could see. But what if the burdens of being a nobleman became greater than those privileges? What would he do if it hindered his interactions with the ghouls and undead, or he were to get involved in some troublesome power struggle? It was simple. He would simply return the tool that had already served its purpose. A nobleman wouldn't be able to give up his position easily if he was in charge of land with people living in it, but an honorary nobleman wouldn't have responsibilities or anything. I would just need to give up my position, stay low for 100 years or so, and then wait for things to calm down. Sam and his daughters were at a loss for words. In this world, noblemen were special people. They were treated as completely different creatures, even if they were members of the same race. In fact, there were more than a few noblemen that wouldn't hesitate to say that they were superior beings to commoners. It is certainly as you say. That's amazing, Vandaloo, to think that you had put so much thought into it. I'm seeing you in a new light now. Darcia's reaction was like this, but only because she had been raised in a dark elf village whose society was nothing like an aristocracy. For those like Sam and his daughters who had once served noblemen, Vandaloo's view on things was astounding. But this was something that Vandaloo could say because he possessed the values of modern Japan. He would not go as far as to say that all of humanity were like brothers and sisters, but he would only give a scornful laugh at those who said that noblemen were beings who were superior to commoners. Sam and his daughters were still completely silent, and Vandeloo became worried that his statement based on his own values had caused them unpleasant feelings. "I see. As expected of you, Bo-chan." It seemed that this wasn't the case. Sam opened his mouth to speak after having been completely still for a while. He seemed to have a deeply moved expression on his face. "So, you are saying that the status of being a nobleman would be nothing but a hindrance to you, Bo-chan?"
Huh? It is just as the goddess prophesied. An extraordinary individual must have extraordinary ambitions,
said Sarya.
Wait and you even said that you are the holy son to Borka's son. So you really are planning to use Talosheim as a foothold to unite the entire continent,
said Rita.
You're joking or teasing me, aren't you?
It somehow seemed that there were various independent rumors and exaggerated truths. "I don't plan on doing anything that outrageous," thought Vandeloo as he scratched his head. Even if he were to do something like that, at most it would be the restoration of Talosheim.
I'm sure it will be fine. Vandeloo is the type who grows when people praise him. Given 1,000 years, I'm sure that he'll be able to unite the continent. I think you're a little too patient.
Vandeloo didn't feel any enthusiasm for the idea of spending 1,000 years uniting the continent. The continent wouldn't be unified so easily anyway. Things don't always go as planned in life, but Vandeloo thought that becoming an honorary nobleman was a reasonable goal. The next day, Borkus's party still hadn't returned, so Vandeloo joined Zadiris and her group in training, deciding to ask questions about jobs later.
Since you are joining us today, boy, we will be doing special training.
They were outside Talosheim's walls. The Ghoul mages, led by Zadiris, the Black Goblins, and the Anubises, including Memediga, were gathered here.
Now then, we will begin training with the aim of acquiring the Chant revocation skill,
said Zadiris. Everyone gave a cheer. The Chant revocation skill is a skill that allows the user to cast spells without the necessary incantations. The effects of this skill could be described in one word as tremendous. It removes the need for the actions normally taken to cast spells, causing spells to require no time to prepare. It allows for consecutive casts of spells that pushes the caster's mana and intelligence to their limits, and even removes the risk of a spell incantation of giving away which spell is being cast, or being interrupted to make the spell misfire. It is a remarkably more difficult skill to acquire than the Chant reduction skill that shortens the time needed to make an incantation, but its effect is also remarkably different. But the method of learning this skill is exceedingly simple. One simply needs to continue casting spells without incantations. But casting a spell without an incantation consumes at least several hundred times the amount of mana and produces an effect that is less than 1/10 of the original spell. Even skilled mages cannot perform this task repeatedly. And so Zadiris and the others were casting spells silently to try and learn this skill. A light resembling that of a firefly, so small that it was almost invisible in the sunlight, appeared at Zadiris's fingertips. Small droplets of water appeared at the fingertips of the ghouls and undead titans to dampen their surroundings. Pinky fingertip-sized flames appeared and vanished, and small gusts of wind blew around them. As this process was repeated, one by one, they ran out of mana.
We're counting on you, boy. Okay.
Vandaloo had been watching up until now, but now he used spirit form transformation on his arms and changed their shape so that they became bundles of tubes. And as these pipes reached the mages, his mana pool of over 100 million was poured into them through mana transfer. This was the most crucial point of the training. Zadiris and the others lacked mana, so even if they did training to learn the Chant revocation skill, it would take far too long for them to achieve their goal. And for Vandaloo to do the training of using up his entire mana pool of over 100 million to increase its size, it would normally take more than an entire day. And so, Vandaloo was providing the mages with mana. This allowed Vandaloo to quickly and easily use up all of his mana.
"All right, we will continue with the training,"
said Zadiris. With this method, the mages could perform 10 days' worth of training to gain the Chant revocation skill in a single day. The problem was,
"I'm surprisingly free."
The problem was that he didn't get the feeling he was training just by acting as a mana source, so he seemed quite free. If he crossed his legs and meditated, then perhaps it would feel like training. Monster explanation: Ghoul Amazoness. When a ghoul woman with qualities suited for magic learns and diligently studies martial skills instead of magic, and continues to do so after becoming a ghoul warrior, she can increase her rank and become this race. There is no significant change in appearance, but tattoo-like patterns appear on the body. Physical ability increases significantly, and the patterns on the body grant the magic resistance skill and enhances inherent magic-oriented qualities. As it is a considerably rare race, there are never two ghoul Amazonesses in a single village. They typically act as leaders of groups, and groups with a ghoul Amazoness tend to have other women in powerful positions. It is said that there are groups of ghouls entirely made of women, led by a ghoul Amazoness in the depths of some devil's nests, though this has not been confirmed. It is unknown what ghoul Amazonesses become if they increase their rank further. No such case has been confirmed up until now. However, it can be assumed that individuals who master not only martial skills, but magic as well may increase their rank to become an even superior race.